The Tao Te Ching Chapter 31. In the ancient text the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu we can see that each verse is an aspect and expression of a variety of concepts of non-dual philosophy. In this video series we will look at each chapter of the Tao Te Ching sequentially. If you've enjoyed the series so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. First, let's listen to this verse of the poem, as beautifully translated by Stephen Mitchell, and then be prepared to delve into its deeper meaning. The poem reads: Weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear. A decent man will avoid them, except in the direst necessity, and, if compelled, will use them, only with the utmost restraint. Peace is his highest value. If the peace has been shattered, how can he be content? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. He doesn't wish them personal harm, nor does he rejoice in victory. How could he rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? He enters a battle gravely, with sorrow and with great compassion, as if he were attending a funeral. This verse from Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching encapsulates several key ideas within Taoist philosophy. Violence and fear. The verse begins by stating that weapons are primarily associated with violence and fear. They are tools that are used to inflict harm and create a sense of intimidation, highlighting their inherently destructive nature. Note that we're not talking about the use of weapons in physical sports, where there is no intention to harm a person or creature. Non-dual philosophy teaches that there is an underlying unity or oneness in all things. From this perspective, violence and fear arise from a sense of separation, where individuals perceive themselves as distinct from others. Weapons symbolize this separation, and reinforce the illusion of division. Detesting weapons. The text suggests that decent individuals, those who value peace and harmony, naturally detest weapons. All decent men detest them. This implies that a virtuous person does not seek to resort to violence or rely on weapons as a means of resolving conflicts. Decent individuals naturally abhor weapons because they understand the destructive consequences associated with their use, reflecting a moral aversion to violence. Non-dual philosophy emphasizes the inherent value of life. Therefore, the aversion to weapons stems from a recognition of the intrinsic worth of every individual, as harming another ultimately harms oneself, reflecting the principle of non-harm, ahimsa. Avoiding weaponry. While acknowledging that there may be situations where the use of weapons becomes necessary, a decent person will do everything possible to avoid them. This implies a preference for peaceful resolution and a reluctance to engage in violence. Virtuous individuals prioritize peaceful resolution of conflicts and only resort to weapons when all other options have been exhausted, and there's an imminent threat to their safety or the safety of others. Non-dual philosophy encourages individuals to act in alignment with the natural flow of life, which is characterized by harmony and balance. Resorting to weapons disrupts this harmony and is only justified when absolutely necessary to restore balance. Reflecting the idea of non-attachment to action, nishkama karma. Restraint in use. If compelled to use weapons, a decent person exercises utmost restraint. This means using force only to the extent necessary to address the immediate threat, without causing unnecessary harm. Even when forced to use weapons, decent individuals exercise self-control and restraint, using force judiciously and proportionally to minimize harm. In non-dual philosophy, using weapons with restraint reflects the principle of acting without egoic desires or impulses, in harmony with the greater whole. Prioritizing peace. Peace is his highest value. Peace is portrayed as the highest value for a decent person. The text emphasizes the importance of maintaining peace and harmony in all circumstances. Peace is regarded as the highest ideal because it fosters harmony, cooperation, and well-being for all. Decent individuals prioritize the preservation of peace in their actions and decisions. Central to non-dual philosophy is the recognition of the inherent peace and unity underlying all existence. Prioritizing peace aligns with the realization that conflict and discord arise from a misunderstanding of this fundamental unity. Seeing enemies as humans. The verse emphasizes that enemies are not demons but rather as fellow human beings. This implies a sense of empathy and understanding towards adversaries, acknowledging their humanity despite being in conflict with them. Despite being adversaries, decent individuals value the shared humanity of their enemies, acknowledging their human capacity for fear and suffering, as well as empathy and compassion. Central to non-dual philosophy is the acknowledgement of the inherent peace and unity underlying all existence. From a non-dual perspective, peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but rather the recognition of the underlying unity of all things. Absence of animosity. A decent person does not harbor personal animosity towards their enemies. Instead, they approach conflict with a sense of detachment and compassion, without seeking personal revenge. Rather than harboring personal vendettas or seeking payback, virtuous individuals approach conflict with a sense of detachment, focusing on resolving issues rather than perpetuating animosity. Non-dual philosophy emphasizes transcending the egoic self and appreciating the connection between all beings. Therefore, holding personal animosity towards others contradicts this insight, as it reinforces the illusion of separateness. Disdain for triumph. The verse questions the idea of celebrating victory, particularly when it involves the destruction or harm of others. A decent person does not take pleasure in the suffering or defeat of their adversaries. How could he rejoice in victory? Celebrating victory at the expense of others' suffering contradicts the principles of decency and compassion. Instead, virtuous individuals seek to mitigate harm and promote reconciliation, even in victory. In non-dualism, the idea of victory implies a separation between winners and losers, reinforcing the illusion of dualism. From a non-dual perspective, there is a recognition that these distinctions are illusory. Violent victory may seem satisfying at the relative level. But if it's at the cost of the suffering of others, then this ultimately means suffering for everybody. For we are one entity, at the absolute level of existence. The sorrow of conflict. Finally, the verse suggests that when a decent person is forced to engage in conflict, they do so with a sense of solemnity, sorrow, and compassion. Conflict is likened to attending a funeral, highlighting the solemnity and seriousness with which it is approached. In non-dual philosophy, the idea of approaching conflict with solemnity and consideration reflects an awareness of the oneness of all beings, and a desire to alleviate suffering, embodying the principle of compassion, karuna. Summary. Verse 31 of the Tao Te Ching teaches that weapons, as tools of violence and fear, are detested by virtuous individuals who prioritize peace above all else. While recognizing the necessity of using weapons in dire circumstances, they do so with utmost restraint, and avoid celebrating victory or causing harm to others. Viewing enemies as fellow human beings, they approach conflict with solemnity and compassion, understanding that all life is connected, and seeking to minimize suffering. This verse embodies the principles of nonviolence, empathy, and the pursuit of harmony found in both Taoist and non-dual teachings. The takeaway message. If you take one message from this verse, it is this. Embrace peace and compassion, even in the midst of conflict, for true virtue lies in restraint and empathy towards all beings. This message encapsulates the central theme of the verse, emphasizing the importance of prioritizing peace and compassion over violence and triumph. It underscores the idea that genuine virtue manifests in the way we approach conflict, with restraint, empathy, and a deep reverence for all life. Instead of perpetuating cycles of violence, the verse encourages us to embody principles of non-harm and compassion, even in the face of adversity. Thanks for watching.